Hello, hello. I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is Render the Darkness, being brought to you today from Antarctica Junior, aka our studio.
Yes.
We forgot to turn on the heat. So if you are watching this, not listening to it, sorry we're so bundled up, but it is really cold.
Yes. So cold.
Really cold. Which makes sense because, we are going to be traveling to Canada for my case today.
Ooh.
Before we get into that, I'm going to give you a fun fact about Canada. I actually didn't know this. Hawaiian pizza was actually created in Ontario, Canada by Sam, I hope I say this right, Panopoulos? Panopoulos. Panopoulos. I always just assumed that Hawaiian pizza was created in Hawaii.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then again, I always just assumed German chocolate cake was made in Germany, but it wasn't either. So,
Oops, sorry.
So, like I said earlier, we're going to be traveling to Canada for today's case, where we will be discussing a truly horrible case all the way around in every aspect. All true crimes, they kind of harbor their own level of horrificness and tragedy, but I always find it especially tragic in the cases when kids are involved.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also important cases to be told because they didn't have an opportunity to leave a mark on the world in any other way because they were so young. So the best we can do is just, try to keep their names alive out in the world and let them not be forgotten.
Yeah, completely agree.
So that being said, that's also your trigger warning for the case. It does involve a child as a victim. So if that's something that you're sensitive to in any way at all, I strongly advise you skip this case. So the case we're going to be talking about today is actually a super, super controversial case, and it's pretty controversial even still to this day. And after you hear it, you're going to understand why. So let's get into it. Lynne was born Cheryl Lynne Harper on August 31st, 1946 in New Brunswick, Canada. Her parents' names were Leslie and Shirley Harper. She had two brothers, Barry, who was her older brother, and Jeffrey, who was her younger, so Lynne was the middle child. Lynne's father decided to join the military in 1940 after having been a school teacher. In July of 1957, the family relocated to the Royal Canadian Air Force Base, or the RCAF base at Clinton, Ontario, which was an air base near London. And from what I read, Lynne made a lot of friends when they moved there pretty quickly. She was described as energetic, loved baseball. She was devoted to her religious studies, even at her young age of 12. She enjoyed attending Bible study, Girl Scouts, or Girl Guides, I think it was called, as well as the Bible class that she was part of. And that's really what I could find about Lynne before the tragedy that we're fixing to get into. So I wish I could have found more on her, but again, that's one of the hard parts about covering cases about children. They've had such short lives. It's really hard to find a lot on children. It just is. So that brings us to June 9th, 1959. The area was in the midst of a major heat wave. Lynne made it home from school around 5:30 p.m. and was very much looking forward to going swimming in the pool that was located on the base. The only problem was one of the pool rules were that either a supervising adult had to be there or minors had to obtain a permit to be allowed to swim unsupervised. Unfortunately, Lynne had neither that day. She did try to get a permit. I couldn't really find out why, but for some reason she wasn't able to get it, and her parents weren't able to accompany her either. So this prompted her to just go back home, where she sat down and had dinner with her family.
Okay.
She ended up deciding to go for a walk around 6:15 p.m., and around 45 minutes after she left, she'd arrive at the base school, which is where she met up with Steven Truscott. Steven was 14 years old at the time and considered popular and shared 7th and 8th grade classes with Lynne. From what I read, Lynne told Steven that she wanted to go see a man that had ponies and lived north on Highway 8.
Okay.
Steven, on the other hand, he was on his way south of the highway to Bayfield River so he could see if any of his friends were around. But before he left, he offered to give Lynne a ride on his bike up to the county road, and he did, so he took her up the county road on his bike to the highway intersection.
Okay.
Once they made it back to the highway, according to Steven, he began pedaling back down the county road, and just as he was about to go across the Bayfield Bridge, he looked back to check on Lynne and saw her climbing into a gray, late-modeled Chevrolet Bel Air with a yellow license plate. By 11:12 p.m., when Lynne hadn't returned home, her father reported her missing. 2 days later, Lynne would be found deceased in the woods near Lawson's Bush, not far from where Steven claimed to have taken her.
Oh, poor baby.
Tragically, she had been strangled and sexually assaulted.
Oh.
And this kind of crime just did not happen here. This was a military base, so the community was in shock.
Right, yeah.
So much that the information of the crime quickly reached all the way to Toronto. Immediately, Ontario's Attorney General, who was Kelso Roberts at the time, put up a $10,000 reward for the capture of the perpetrator of, according to his words, quote, "this revolting and savage crime," end quote, which I agree with.
Yep.
So that reward was to be given whether the perpetrator was found dead or alive.
Ooh.
They did not care.
That gave people an option.
Yeah, they didn't care how they got him, they just wanted him.
They should do that more often.
Well, keep that in mind, because you can see why they probably shouldn't do that more often.
Yeah, well.
So $10,000 back then would be roughly around $45,000 today.
Okay.
Harold Graham, who worked for Ontario's Criminal Investigation Bureau, was assigned to be the lead investigator by the Ontario Provincial Police. I'll be referring to the Ontario Provincial Police as the OPP for the rest of the case.
Okay.
Just because it's kind of long to say.
Yeah.
And also, I found when I was doing my research that I struggled to say it. So, not going to lie. So, the day after Lynne's body was discovered, which was on the 11th, so the 12th, the OPP would pick up Steven Truscott, as he was the last person known to have seen Lynne alive. And they charged him with her murder.
Oh.
No one else was ever investigated, despite there being at least 3 other potential suspects living on base at the time, 2 of which were actually acquaintances of Lynne's family.
Wow.
And it was debated whether Steven should be tried as an adult or a juvenile. Remember, he's 14 years old.
Yeah.
On June 13th, Steven was officially charged with first-degree murder. On June 20th, he attended juvenile court in Goderich, Ontario, under the Juvenile Delinquents Acts of 1908, but the Crown ordered that the juvenile court wasn't experienced enough in the legal issues of the case, therefore, they shouldn't be the ones to handle the case. In the end, Steven would be tried as an adult.
Oof.
He'd stand trial in front of Justice Ronald Ferguson in the Huron County seat of Goderich. He pled not guilty. The Crown questioned 59 witnesses and introduced 76 pieces of evidence, including the coroner, Dr. Peniston, testified that Lynne had died between 7 p.m. and 7:45 on June 9th, 1959.
Okay.
Time of death was determined through examination of Lynne's stomach contents by placing them into a glass jar and then holding it up to a window for light.
Ew.
The coroner used this evidence to determine the time of death based on Lynne's last known meal.
Okay.
Eyewitness testimony and Steven's statements established that Lynne was in fact with Steven that evening. Another child saw Steven cross a bridge with Lynne on his bicycle and later saw Steven cross the bridge again without her.
Okay.
Physical examination of Steven 3 days after Lynne's death found 2 lesions on his penis. The lesions were used as evidence that he had raped Lynne. No one else was seen with Lynne that evening, so defense counsel Frank Donnelly presented 15 witnesses to the court, including evidence which challenged the test of the stomach contents and disputed the time of death presented by Dr. Peniston, accounts that Steven had met Lynne in the schoolyard after 7 p.m. on June 9th to give her a ride to Highway 8 on his bicycle, eyewitness testimony about Steven returning across the bridge alone, which placed him far from the area of Lawson's Bush, and physical evidence of Lynne's body and the location where it was found indicated that she'd been strangled and assaulted. The jury was sent to deliberate. They were sent at 10:45 to deliberate and returned at 10:55 on September 30th, 1959 to deliver a guilty verdict.
10 minutes. Wow.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, they handed down a guilty verdict with a plea for mercy. Steven was immediately sentenced to death by way of hanging by Justice Ferguson, making Steven Canada's youngest death row inmate ever.
Wow.
His execution date had initially been set for December 8th, but on November 20th, the execution date would get pushed into the following year to February 20th, so Steven's lawyer would have fair time to appeal. But 2 days after Steven's 15th birthday, his attempted appeal would be denied.
Mm-hmm.
But his death sentence would be commuted to life in prison the following day.
Okay.
And on February 24th, his application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada was also denied. A book was published in 1966 by author Isabelle Labourdes. I hope I say that right. Labourdes?
Don't ask me. I'm terrible at those things.
I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I'm sorry. And the book was titled The Trial of Steven Truscott, which I will link in the show notes, that book, because it is important to this case. So if you get a chance to read it, absolutely read it.
Mm-hmm.
So in it, she outlined some pretty significant flaws in the prosecution's case, which triggered new interest in what was already a case of interest to the public, and this led to a lot of pressure on Canadian Supreme Court to review the case and Steven's conviction. In October of that year, for 5 days, they heard testimony, and then in January of 1967, they heard submissions, and on May 4th, 1967, by a vote of 8-1, the conviction was upheld.
Mm-hmm.
On October 21st, 1969, Steven was paroled after serving 10 years. He would go on to live under an assumed name for a while and settle down in Gulf, Ontario. He would get married and have 3 children. In 1997, he requested a DNA test to be done in an attempt to prove he was innocent, only to find out in late 2000 that all physical evidence from the case had vanished.
Oh, no.
Poof. Gone.
Wow.
Despite that, he was determined to clear his name, so on November 29th, 2001, he filed a petition with Federal Ministry of Justice to have his case reviewed. He submitted a 600-page brief that had been prepared by the Association in Defense of the Wrongfully Convicted on Steven's behalf. In it, they alleged that the conviction was the result of shoddy forensic science, police tunnel vision, and the extreme suppression of evidence.
Mm.
In January 2002, the Minister of Justice ordered an investigation into the matter, and the Honorable Justice Fred Kaufman was appointed to review the case. Justice Kaufman reviewed the historical record and a substantial amount of fresh evidence, including the testimony of over 20 witnesses. In April of 2004, Justice Kaufman delivered a report of over 700 pages in which he concluded that, quote, there was clearly a reasonable basis for concluding that a miscarriage of justice likely occurred, end quote. Justice Kaufman's report looked at evidence that had been collected at the time of Lynne's death, including the analysis of the stomach contents, the decomposition of her body, and the amount of rigor mortis, which, if you don't know what that is, it's stiffening of muscles after death, which had been crucial factors in the conviction, as they always are.
Yeah.
Since the original trial, both stomach content analysis and the amount of rigor mortis had been found to be highly unreliable scientific evidence of time of death. Justice Kaufman recommended that the case be referred to the Ontario Court of Appeal. June 19, 2006, the Ontario Court of Appeal began a 3-week hearing based on fresh evidence. The original coroner stated that Lynne died between 7 p.m. and 7:45 p.m. Therefore, the Crown argued that if Lynne died between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., that Steven was the murderer, yet if she died after 8 p.m., he was not.
Okay.
The new evidence included expert witness evidence about determining the time of death and the use of stomach contents. The witnesses concluded that the time of death noted on Dr. Peniston's autopsy was not scientifically valid. Stomach contents suggested at a time of death closer to the evening or night of June 9th, 1959. Timeline of events. Steven Truscott, The Civil Society Through Education Dialogue. The stage of body, histology, and weather suggested a time of death toward the day or night of June 10th, 1959.
Okay.
So definitely after 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Well past the time they have been saying it was.
Yeah.
2 previously undisclosed reports by Dr. Peniston, which indicated different times of death. So he even had 2 different times logged in his notes. These were not included in the 1959 or the 1966 Supreme Court references.
But why? That would would think that would be like,
This case really, really got me. It really did, because I have a lot of opinions on this case. Testimony from a dermatologist who indicated that lesions on Steven's penis were consistent with a pre-existing skin condition, not injury.
Ooh.
The court was presented with the following options. They could either dismiss the reference, order a new trial, enter an acquittal, or they could provide a declaration of innocence.
Okay.
On January 31st, 2007, in a very rare move, the Ontario Court of Appeal allowed the admission of oral arguments into the appeal. Between the original trial in 1959 and the 2007 refence, many scientific advancements had been made which allowed more accurate determination of time of death. On August 28, 2007, the Ontario Court of Appeal determined that the original verdict was a miscarriage of justice and must be nullified. Based on the miscarriage of justice found by the court, it was determined that Steven should be acquitted. Steven then requested a declaration of innocence, not just an acquittal. The court refused, not having heard any evidence that provided that Steven couldn't have been the murderer. However, with so much time passing, there would be no chance of getting an actual conviction on that, so a new trial would be pointless.
Yeah.
Therefore, finally, on March 28, 2008, the Robbins report was completed and provided a recommendation for the amount of compensation that Steven was to be given for his now determined wrongful conviction. The report concluded that Steven should receive $6.5 million for his suffering since his original conviction, and he was acquitted of all charges.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. That's like how...
They just wanted a person. They just wanted somebody to put it on.
Yeah, I mean, you figure that with it happening, you said all on a military base or close to a military base?
It's close to the military base. Actually, it was on the military base because it was at the schoolyard of the military base. It was at the military base's schoolyard. Okay,
well, you figure since it happened on the military base, they would be a lot more thorough.
Well, here's my thing. There's a lot that I didn't include in this, and if you read the book, you're going to get a lot more of these details. But if you remember in the beginning, I mentioned that there were 3 other potential suspects on a military base.
Right.
Put that together. Who would you rather blame?
Me personally?
No, not you. I'm saying if you had somebody who were in a high position of hierarchy and you didn't want them to be accused or go down for something, you would find another person to put it on, right? Yeah. I'm not saying that that's what happened. Right. I have no idea if that's what happened. Could be, could not be. Don't come at me. But I'm just saying, I read all of the evidence. I read the case notes. I read all of the court documents. I really deep dove this case because I was so intrigued by it. And I genuinely do not believe Steven Truscott had anything to do with Lynne's. He was just wrong place, wrong time, and an easy target. That's my opinion.
God. I don't really know how I feel about it because, I didn't read as much of it as you did.
Yeah.
But, it's like, I don't know if I can really say I don't think 100% sure he didn't do it. Because, I mean, he had the opportunity.
And
he
that's
was there.
literally their only
yeah, like you said,
evidence is that he was there. Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, but like you said, the actual time of death wasn't until June 10th.
Correct. Well, that's what they determined later on after
Right.
using, much more advanced scientific evidence than just holding stomach contents up to the light of a window.
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
I mean, this was,
Well, the
50s.
50s.
I don't know what kind of technology they did or didn't have back then, but I don't know. I've stated my opinion on the case. I think he was innocent, and I do think that, him being acquitted, and I do think him getting some kind of compensation for the things that he had to go through. Because think about it. Let's say somebody committed the crime, right? And then they got out and they got married and they had kids and they were living their life and they could just move right along, Would they continue to go back over and over and say, hey man, DNA test me, lie detector test me, here's all the evidence I have that it wasn't me? Like, would somebody just keep going back and pushing if they really did do it?
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're taking a huge chance of them reopening the case and reopening the evidence and reevaluating it. They're taking a huge chance that they might get slapped back into prison, or they may be found guilty for something else or charged with something else. So that's a huge gamble for somebody who did do it to keep going back and pushing that.
That's true.
So, I don't know. Like I said, just my gut feeling. My gut is that he didn't do it. But again, this was a huge controversial case in Canada, especially. So, what do you guys think? Do you think he was wrongfully accused, or do you think that they shouldn't have let him go?
I don't know. Like I said, I mean, like at the beginning, I was probably like, yeah, there's a possibility, but then, like the more they got into it, the more evidence and a lot, it's kind of like, probably didn't do it. So.
But that is this episode. Before we go, we want to give a shout out here to Nightmare Roadshow, who, if you have not checked out, you absolutely should, because they're awesome.
They're so cool, funny people.
They're hilarious. We just did an interview with them a few days ago. It came out. We had a lot of fun. But absolutely go check them out. Very Gold Decon and Laura Slashers, who we did our interview with. There are other people on their show as well. But very cool people. Yeah. Very, very awesome show. They do a lot of ghost EVPs and stuff like that. So if that piques your interest, go check them out. Yeah. And we appreciate them allowing us to be on their show. That was an honor and a privilege. So we appreciate it very much. And we appreciate all you guys, and we appreciate all your support. And we hope you enjoy what we're doing. We hope you keep listening.
Yep.
Other than that,
see you next time.
Yeah. Stay safe, stay weird.